Welcome back. Now, earlier we talked about mesquite and the fact that controlling these plants early before they do serious harm is the best option. And with us now is Pat Birch telling us a little bit more about how to control mesquite and other brushy plants. Pat, let's begin with the backpack sprayer. How can this be an important tool for ranchers who are trying to control brushy plants and mesquite?
Yes, well, the main thing is its versatility. These can be used for basal applications, which are set up to spray oil at the base of the tree, or it can be used as a foliar application. I generally like to have a dedicated piece of equipment, so that one I use for water and one I use for oil. But this particular one is set up for basal application right now. The important thing that you need to consider is that it has to have oil-resistant seals. Okay. Those are generally called Viton seals, and you'll see that on, it's usually specified by the manufacturer when you're purchasing it. The other thing about this is the wand that comes with the backpack. And it is a plastic wand. It's very flexible. As you can see, the shutoff here is at the handle. And so if you're making an application, the amount of herbicide that's in this tube, this wand, will actually treat several stems. So if you're making the application and then as you walk from plant to plant, you're going to end up dripping herbicide, which is not a very responsible thing to do and not very cost effective. Sure. But you can manage to minimize that amount of drippage by using a check valve. Okay. And these are very simple to purchase. These check valves have an ability to shut off at about 5 psi. They can be inserted here right below the spray tip, and that'll work pretty well at reducing the amount of dripping. Okay. Now the other thing that we have is the more deluxe wand, as you said, the gold-plated wand. That's right. This one is set up different. This is an ultra-low volume wand. Okay. Now the handle here is the same, but our shutoff now, there's a cord that runs down the tube and actually shuts off at the tip, and it's a very crisp shutoff. This is very expensive, but the one that I have that is actually attached to my backpack at home is now about 25 years old. Wow. So it lasts a long time. It also has it's a lot more rigid and durable for pressing it down into like a rose bush or something like that where you're making the application. Very good.
Pat, I've heard you talk about both cut stump and basal treatments. We don't have mesquite in our country. Tell us a little bit about the differences between those two treatments.
Yeah, and the good thing is that this kind of an application applies to all brush species. Sure. So it will apply to your situation as well. When we're making the low volume basal application, we're making the application to the lower 12 to 15 inches of the stem. So from the ground line up about 12 to 15 inches, you're making the application all the way around. As you see, we also have root flares here. These are surface roots. They can sometimes pop up a little bit different distance from the stem, and those should be treated as well. So we're treating any kind of bark that's exposed that we can see. So that's how we're making our low-volume basal application.
And the cut stump, through the magic of TV, we've already cut it.
We've already cut it, and so when we make that cut, now we've got an exposed cut surface here, and we want to either use a water-soluble herbicide and make the application immediately after cutting. So as soon as you cut it, set the saw down, make the application to that cambium layer. You don't want to waste any time. You want to put it on right away. Now, if you're using a low-volume basal technique, you can actually still come back anytime afterwards, make the application here, as well as to any exposed bark or root flares, just the same way we would with the low-volume basal technique, but now we don't have the tree above it. Generally, when we talk about cut surface treatments, where we're cutting it and treating a stump like that, low-volume basal works very well for up to about 6 inches diameter. Kind of depends on the corkiness of the bark. Okay. But generally up to about 6 inches. So once you get larger stems than that, that's when we would start making cuts. The type of the herbicide that we're going to use, most people are familiar with the cut surface treatment that is applied with Tordon RTU herbicide. That's a water-soluble. So that would be the application we put on immediately after cutting. If we're going to do this with the low-volume basal mix, the basal cuts surface treatment, then we're going to make that application anytime afterwards. You know, you can be days, weeks, months afterwards, as long as it hasn't started to resprout. And we're going to make that with either Remedy Ultra herbicide in oil, or we're going to make that with Pasture Guard HL herbicide in oil.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for these practical tips.